Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I am going to show you how I made this retreat bag. This is a free pattern by Emmaline Bags, available on her website. I will link it below as well. This is the size small, and I'm using cork from Fabric Funhouse, and I lined it with this lovely mermaid teal. It is waxed cotton, so that means that everything is now waterproof, water resistant. And then I have this beautiful matching zipper. This is Zipper by the Yard from My Handmade Space. And that's about it on specs. That's it. Enjoy the video. Also, I meant to say that it is a framed bag, and I'm not going to be going over how I make the frame in this particular video, but I do have another video on my channel that I will link when we get there in this construction video. It'll be in a card in this top corner up here, and you can click that to learn how to make your own wireframe. In that video, it is to make a frame that is 10 inches across the top and 3 inches down either side. But you'll need to make a couple amendments because this small size bag, it's only 1.75 inches on the side and then 9 inches across the top and then another 1.75. So write that down and apply those measurements when you're making your wireframes, or you can purchase the frames that come from Emmaline Bags on her website. I will also link those below. Now you can enjoy. The first thing that we need to do is gather our supplies. So I have my two exterior mains here, and they are the size small, so 13.5 wide by 9 tall. And then my two interior pieces, which I'm using waxed cotton. And so these are 13.5 wide, and then I did make them 1/4 inch shorter so that the bag nests nicely at the end. So it's 13.5 wide by 8.75 inches tall. And then I have a 16-inch zipper, which is Zipper by the Yard, and I am going to add my zipper ends to it. And I made these a little bigger than the pattern called for, and they are 3.25 tall by 1.75 wide, or I guess technically they're 1.75 tall by 3.25 wide. And I'm going to be doing a folding method to make those work. Now, through a lot of trial and error, I realized that just folding the cork and creating a mass of 4 layers here, and then putting it on the ends, I was having a lot of issues getting my rivets to set because my posts are just too long, and then the ones that fit it, the hole that I created, it was too big for the rivet head. So I kind of met myself in the middle here, and so here's a completed one. And so if you can see how much wider it gets here at the top. What I had to do is take small pieces of cork and I folded them and I glued them to the underside of the zipper where I'm gonna be punching my holes to create even more layers of cork so that my rivets sit nicely. So that is what I'm gonna do now. And to get my zipper head on, I'm gonna burn the edges of my zip tape. Cut this again. And I don't have a zipper jig or any fancy equipment to put zipper heads on, so I'm just gonna do it the way that I know how, which is I slide one side on, and then with my fingers holding it, I'm gonna slide the other side of the zipper tape in, and then holding both sides of the zipper tape, I'm gonna start zipping. So you can see it creates kind of this weird bubble where it doesn't quite meet up, but that's fine. I'm just gonna zip it all the way to the end and pop it open, and then now the zipper tape will sit nicely, but you could see there's a slight overhang of this top zip, but that's fine. I'm gonna cover it. So the first thing I'm gonna do is glue my little extra pieces to the back of my zipper. If you look closely, you can see them down in there. But I did them on the underside so it's not noticeable from the top. And it kind of just gives it a sturdier hold too. It's because it's a lot thicker. You could probably use a piece of Peltex here if you wanted to do that. I just am using up my cork scraps. And so these pieces are really tiny, 1.25 by 1/2 inch. and I'm just gluing them together and then gluing them to the bottom of my zipper. And I'm gonna make the fold face the inside of the zipper. So then if people do happen to flip it over and really investigate, they're not gonna see raw edges of cork down there. You could alleviate this entire step if you used a zipper that was cut to size already and it had zipper stops and all that. It's like if you had a 16-inch zipper already, that would totally work too. And make this a lot quicker of a process. I spent more time than I care to admit on this yesterday. All right, so now while that glue is setting, I'm gonna get my zipper tabs prepared. Whoa. And the way that I'm gonna do that is use double-sided tape, which you could easily use glue if you wanted to here, but I found that this was quicker for me last night when I was messing around with the pattern. And so I'm just burning the outside edges because those will be raw. I've been painting them with leather edge paint on the other ones, but just for now, that way you don't have a bunch of fuzzies. And so when I'm folding these up, I want to make sure that they're going to be wide enough that whenever I rivet into these, that the whole rivet head stays on this width here. So that way the rivet's set properly. You can see here. So if you can feel this, it's about a ½ an inch or so wide where all the layers are. And that's so that my rivet's set correctly. Because the problem I was running into last night was they were going sideways as soon as I would set them, and it was beyond frustrating. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my sewing machine and I'm going to stitch around the side, along the bottom, and then back up the side. And that's going to give me this stitch line here, the finished look. And then I'll slide this onto the zipper to finish it. I have my ends sewn and I left the top open, and this is where the folded edge is. And so now what I'm going to do is slide it onto the end of my zipper, same to this side. It does help if you sew these two together, so feel free to do that if you want to. Trim this side down. Okay, so now I just need to punch holes in my ends and put some rivets in. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball it and feel where those extra pieces of cork are. And then I'm going to put some rivets in. All right, so I'm a little off here. There, much better. Now we need to prep our main exterior pieces for the zipper sandwich. And so I'm going to mark, the pattern calls for you to mark at 1 inch in from each short edge, but I'm going to go in 1.25 and I'm just going to make this mark in the seam allowance. And this is where we're going to glue the zipper to. We're going to leave this part, we're going to pull the zipper away when we're sewing that part. Sorry, my dogs are in here with me, of course, and the little one just dropped a toy. All right, so we've got our marks there, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my zipper, and I'm going to lay it right side down, and I'm going to glue it in place, and I'm only going to put glue between the two marks that I made here. And so I'm going to be sure that my zipper is centered. So if you wanted to, you could mark your center on your zipper tape and your main panel. If you want to, I am just eyeballing it as usual. And then get your zipper tape glued or use double stick tape. All right, once that is done, we are going to create this sandwich and glue the lining down. Now, if you're using fabric here, make sure that your lining cotton is right side down. flip this and let the glue set. So I'm not sure what happened to that last video, but what I did is I sewed all the way across, but what you have to make sure that you pull the zipper out at that 1.25 inch line that I made earlier. So I will show you on this other side. But so I stitched across it and I was sure to pull my ends out. And then what I didn't do though is you don't top stitch it. So we're just gonna fold these two to be wrong sides together and just clip them to keep them out of the way. And then we're gonna repeat the process, excuse me, on the other side. So I'm gonna put glue across the top of my cork. And then I'm gonna glue my zipper into place. Oh, and again, so don't glue down the last 1.25 inch. Then once that glue sets, I think I get enough over here. Once that glue sets, we will lay our other, whatever this is, wax cotton down, which I'm not even gonna glue it this time, I'm just gonna clip it. All right, and then we'll move to the machine, and what the pattern tells you to start sewing in the middle and to sew out, and then once you hit that mark, you pull the zipper down out of the way, and then you just continue sewing straight, and then you're gonna go back and sew the other side. So that's what I'm gonna do now. So I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance here. And that's because I'm using number 5 zip tape. So if you have thinner zip tape, then you want to amend your seam allowance. So I'm going to stitch to that 1.25 mark and then lift my presser foot. Oh, I need to take some of my stitches out because I didn't line up my fabric all the way, and I want to make sure that it's 1.25 from the shortest edge here. So you can see my two pieces aren't lined up totally. So I'm just gonna back those out. Okay, so let's try this again. So you're gonna stop at the mark that you made, act like I didn't just mess up, and then you're gonna lift your presser foot and pull the zipper out of the way and lay your exterior and your liner back together, and then just continue sewing. And now I'm going to flip and do the other side. There we go. All right, so this is what it looks like now. You can see the zipper looks a little bit funky, but that's because it's hanging out of those seams. And that is what is going to cause it to hang like that at the end. I need to add my tag, so I'm going to do that now. And I'm going to take into account that this whole top section folds down and creates that box. So I put mine 2 inches from this top seam here, 2 inches down. So that's what I'm going to do now. My tags are from All This Wood. I will link them below. Alright, so I'm just going to pop back to my machine and sew this in. And when I'm sewing my tag in, I'm only going to sew through the exterior here. But I'm not going to make you guys watch that, so I'll be right back. Alright, so the next step is you want to unzip your zipper, lay your exteriors together, and we need to clip our bags. So you're going to fold your seam allowance to go toward the lining, and make sure that your seams are lined up. I'm going to fold my zipper out of the way. But you want to make sure that your seams are lined up when you clip here, because we're going to sew this together. And you want it to be even. So I like to start with my seams and then I clip around the rest. I didn't do the greatest job lining up my edges here. You can kind of see, oh, if you can't really see that, weird. But I have like 0.25 or so hanging over. And so what I'm gonna do is we need to trim the boxes out of the corners here so it's easier to sew on the next step. And the pattern tells you to do 2 by 2 inch boxes, which I'm gonna do on the exterior, but on the lining, I'm gonna make them 1.75 by 1.75. And that is because at the end, when it's all done, if the box bottom of the lining is a little bit smaller than the exterior, it's gonna nest nicer. It's hard to tell because this is black wax cotton, but you know, whatever. Do what you want to do. You can try 2 by 2, or you can try the 1.75 by 1.75 and see what you like better. Okay, so I'm going to cut these out. All right, so now we're gonna go to the machine. We're gonna start sewing on the lining, and we're gonna, oh, that's not lining. We're gonna start sewing on the lining, and I'm gonna sew the L shape, and I'm gonna leave a birthing hole here down on the bottom section. I'm gonna sew the L shape, sew to this corner, and then just like in my patterns, I'm gonna back stitch well and then pull this corner to meet the other corner and continue sewing, so that way it's easier to create the box bottom later on. I'm also going to make the bottom, or not the bottom, but the lining on the sides. I'm going to make the seam allowance wider than I am down here. So the seam allowance is going to be 1/4 inch down here, so I'm going to do probably about 1/2 inch towards the bottom and taper up to the 1/4 inch. Alright, so make sure that your zipper is out of the way before you sew up here, or else you will catch it. since I'm already over here, I'm just going to stay here. And what I'm going to do is trim up these really wide seam allowances. This is where I didn't line up my edges nicely, so I'm just going to trim this off before moving on. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach into the birthing hole here, and I'm going to unzip my zipper all the way and reach to the exterior bottoms. And now you can see, if you just poke your fingers through, your seams are going to be perfectly lined up. So I'm going to hold those together and stitch the box bottoms. Throw a clip in here for good measure, so I can maneuver. All right, now I'm going to just continue all the way around the same way. If you want to see a closer video of this or a slower version, you can watch my mini box tote pattern video, and I go over it in more detail. And so I'm going to make my seam allowance bigger on this box bottom too, just like with every other seam allowance. So make sure you reflect that if you make a smaller seam allowance like I have. All done. Alrighty, so I'm just going to trim down my seam allowances on all of my boxed corners. Now we get to turn the bag right side out. I'm going to roll the seam, pulling the zipper up, I'm going to roll the seam of the interior and exterior so that they lay wrong sides together. And what I'm doing is I'm rolling my fingers back and forth until I feel that it is lined up. And so now I have it all tucked in around the top, so I'm just going to push the wax canvas in. And I'm doing this before closing up the birthing hole because I want to make sure that it's going to sit nicely before I close the hole up. Because with wax cotton, it's kind of one and done. So if you mess up your stitches, then pick them out and restitch and it's not in the same exact spot, then you're going to see the holes. So I feel like it's lying pretty nicely in there. So now I'm going to pull this back up and close this hole now that I'm sure that it looks nice. And if you've been watching me, then you know that I sew the L's on the bottom of my linings. And I do that because when you're at this stage, the birthing hole is all wonky. You can just find the edges of the birthing hole and pull. And did you see, so when these are sticking straight out, you find the edges and pull and they fold right in because of those L's. And see, so it just folds up so nicely. It makes a great edge. So I'm just gonna pin these. I'm gonna pop back over to my machine and close this hole up. All right, so I got this birthing hole stitched up, and now I'm just gonna tuck it back into the exterior. And this is, I've noticed this is pretty funny. So the last 2 bags that I made like this, it's like full of air. Like the wax cotton, because it's waterproof, and then the cork, it traps the air when you fold, or when you close up the birthing hole. So I just kind of get it in there as well as I can, and then just push it all, like flatten it all to get all the air out. All right, so I'm gonna roll the 2 between my fingers like last time and get the top edge nice. And then the last step before we put the frames in is we need to top stitch 1/8 from the top here, and then we're going to top stitch another line about 1/2 inch below that first line, and that's going to create the channel here to put in the frame so that when it closes it has that cool shape. I don't know what happened, the video cut off again, but I'm top stitching now across. I'm doing my first top stitch line 1/8 from the zipper. And I ran out of bobbin thread. All right, wow, it is just one of those sewing days, you know, where you break a ton of needles and stuff just isn't working. Yeah, that's my day today. Oh, lovely, I've been sewing a lot longer without bobbin thread than I thought. Turns out my bobbin was not out of thread, it just pulled out, or like the thread broke, and I was sewing the whole time. That's lovely. Okay, let's try this again. Luckily, it got this whole section, so now I can explain to you what I thought was videoing before and it didn't video. So this seam line here is rather thick and I don't want to sew over it. So I'm going to start about 1/8 or to 1/4 of an inch past the stitch line here. All right, it worked, thankfully. So I'm just going to trim these threads, and now I have to go back and do the second line of stitching, and I'm going to do that 1/2 inch below the first line. So again, starting on that seam, that side seam, and so I sewed to the other side seam, and now I'm just going to skip over that thick seam and continue sewing. Alright, making progress. Alright, so I took my table off, my sewing, hey guys, I took the extension off, sorry about that, and so I'm going to top stitch from the top, wrapping my bag around the bed of my machine. And I'm going to start on one of my side seams, and I'm going to start a little bit past the thick edge. I'm going to start about, I don't know, less than 1/8 of an inch from that side seam there. And I'm just going to start stitching. So I'm going to slide over that thick seam and just start sewing again, just past it. Alright, so the last step is to insert the frame into the bag. You can see here that now it's just like a pretty standard triangle bag. I made my frames here, and I will link, there'll be a little something that pops up at the top here to the video of how I made these. But they're a little bit different size-wise because this is technically the size small bag. This, if you follow the other tutorial of the other video, you'll understand, but this top is just under 9 inches long, and then my sides here are 1.75 inch long. So 1.75, 9, and 1.75. And so you can use the other tutorial to make these if you want to, or you can purchase on EmmalineBags.com. She sells these. But I'm vending on Saturday and I didn't have time to order them, so I just got creative. So to insert the wire frames, you need to unpick one of the seams, just the lining. I'm going to do this side. And so you're just unpicking in between the two lines that you made when we just created that channel. We're just unpicking those stitches. All right, and then I'm just going to take one edge and feed it through. All right, so there's one side in, and now I'm going to feed the opposite edge, or the opposite side. And then if you want to, you can whip stitch this closed by hand. I just leave mine. I just kind of like push the wax canvas back together, and you can't even tell that there's a hole there. You'd have to really be looking for it. But so there it is with the frame in it. And then you just want to open and close it a couple times to train it. But there we go, that's the gist of it. It's not too bad for the first time closing. And you can bend this wire and just manipulate it until it's sitting the way that you like it to. And then you can you know, just form it the way that you want it to look. Oops, I just bent the wire. It kind of looks like a mini doctor bag, which I really enjoy. But yeah, so just tweak it, maneuver it until you get it sitting like you want it to. This one I opened and closed multiple times until it became super pliable and easy. So you can see this one's a little bit wonky compared to this one, but I'm just going to keep messing with this and get it to sit how I want it to. I thought that I would just real quick give you an idea about how big these are. So here, 2 full-size glues, let's see, full-size pair of scissors, my leather punch, rotary cutter, let's see, all sorts of, let's see, seam ripper, pen, lighter, chalk, another lighter. I'm trying to see what else I can fit in here. So even with all of that stuff, there's still a solid 2.5 inches under here, or on top of all that, that you could easily stuff way more stuff into this. Another thing that I thought that I would mention is the last thing that I would do would be that I would finish these edges here. And I am going to use edge coat just because it's not a lot of surface area and it'll make it look nice. But you could also use Aleene's Fabric Fusion. I hope that you guys enjoyed that video of making this super fun bag. I had to whip up a couple more. I'm sending one to Fabric Funhouse I made as a gift in their new Melanie cork. It's the flowery one. It's really pretty. I will post a photo here. But yes, I love that one. I am really into making these with the wax cotton on the inside because it just makes it doubly safe for toiletries and as a shave kit. And the size of it is just perfect for fitting full-size things, which you saw in my example at the end of the video. But yeah, anywho, I'm glad that you guys joined me today. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. Do me a favor, leave me a comment below, like, share, pin, all that. You know the drill. I hope that you guys are all doing great out there and you're staying safe and happy and healthy. And please exercise your right and make sure that you get your vote in before November 3rd. Much love to all of you.